Rebecca, we were talking about Alan Alda.
We were talking about this Fellini-esque episode called Dreams, which you couldn't do. Alan had written it quite a while earlier than when it was finally done. And it couldn't be done earlier simply because you needed that build-up with the audience of life in the camp, of what it was like, their incredible existence of maybe getting up at 3 or 4 in the morning and operating till 7, 8, having breakfast, crashing in their tents, maybe without breakfast, just being so exhausted. And as a chore, or as an acting task, as Jean Frankel would have said, the fatigue should always be with these characters. They are really basically always exhausted, always tired, and that also feeds into the craziness, the hijinks. The only way to stay sane in a situation like that, where you're operating on boys so young they're hardly shaving, it's horrendous, it's horrific, and the noise that Houlihan would say, I bed down with fleas and lice and rats, and this is the life when she was talking to Harry or to Sherman Potter. This is what we do. How do you act that? How do you make it more active? And the fatigue was a big part about that. And finally, we could do this kind of, I always called it the Fellini-esque episode of dreams, and all these people had those dreams, those haunting, terrible dreams. BJ's dancing with his wife, and for Margaret to be in her wedding dress and then wake up and it's covered with blood and all of these soldiers are passing by her, and I mean, it was just totally believable, and the audience believed it and got to know us better because here we were revealing our subconscious, our dreams.
I wanted to ask you about the relationship between Hawkeye and Houlihan, especially later on with the Comrades in Arms.
Right, after Comrades in Arms, another episode that Alan wrote for us, wanting to do it much earlier in the run of the series, maybe third or fourth season or whatever, third season. But Gene Reynolds actually told me that. He said, I just felt the audience wouldn't be ready for it. And I said, I don't know if I'm ready for it. No. And golly, Gene called me at home after it aired. He said it just was just spectacular to see the two of them finally come to grips with this kind of bubbling cauldron of passion that's been going on, that even they were not all that aware of until they were sort of thrust into this situation. It was truly a labor of love. Alan co-directed with Bert, and the three of us had dinner the night it was aired. I mean, it was truly such a labor of love. And yes, their relationship was duly affected by that episode from there on. I mean, they still were so different and they had their snarly moments, but as he wrote it in the episode, he said, something happened to us there and you can't take it back. You can't, she tried to, because she was rejected, she tried to go back to her old mode of behavior with him, and he said, Margaret, it's not gonna work, And I loved that. I loved that they revealed that to each other and had this little kind of secret thing, which spurred the longest kiss still recorded on television in the final movie. They finally gave this outpouring of all their feelings, and there it was, with all the guys around us looking at their watches and kind of trying to pretend that this wasn't happening. But it was great. It was so real, so easy to work on good material and real behavior.
Let me talk about some of the changes that happened during the run. First, Larry Gelbart left the series. What impact did that have?
He did and he didn't. He never really left us. He left, I think, in year 5. Um, the tremendous impact, I think, came out of not having Larry around, who is, gosh, I call him my friend, the genius, which embarrasses him, but he is. I mean, let's be honest. He was so delicious to have around, just funny. He doesn't know how not to be funny. Um, I was standing at the coffee wagon with him at one point. It was early. He stifled a yawn, and I looked at him, and he said, "Sorry, it must have been something I wrote." He just could not be funny. And so I just sort of missed having him there. In dailies, I had done this scene with Gary Berghoff. That was so funny. We were just working with all cylinders burning, and we were so funny. We were cracking each other up. We had to keep rehearsing it to kind of get that out of our system, but things kept happening that were different in each time. Every time we rehearsed it, it got funnier and funnier. And Gary and I are going, we got to pull this thing together. We got to, And so when I saw Larry the next morning, I said, I think Gary and I did a scene. It was something he wrote. I did that scene last night. I said, it's got to be the funniest thing we've done this far. Gary and I together, I said, it was just, and I went on, and I said, what am I doing now? I'm going to sit there in dailies watching you like, well, am I wrong? Did I overdo it? And maybe I'm going to overdo it now, and you're going to expect too much. And I went through this 3-act play with him, and he was laughing, and he said, I'm sure it's fine. I'm sure it's fine. I said, no, it's better than it's fine. It's fine. It's wonderful. It's so funny. But anyway, out of that came that he sat next to me in dailies. I thought, oh, please let this be, as wonderful as I thought it was. And sure enough, the scene came on, and he hit my leg, went flying up. He laughed so hard, and he looked at me, and when we talked later, he said it was everything and more than you said. It was right on the money, but it was terribly funny. Radar comes in, and Houlihan's leg is sort of dangling out of the cot, and he wakes her, and she accuses him of staring at her leg, and it's just, I think about it now, and I can just keep on laughing. But Gary and I found all those spots, and we loved doing it. We still talk about it. It was just delicious.
Let's talk about the transition from McLean Stevenson to Harry Morgan.
Boy, I was frightened when Mac told me he was leaving. He was such a rock and funny, and I thought the pivotal piece in, he was so manic and funny as the Colonel. Like to bounce off his humor and his behavior was just such a joy. And I thought, oh, what are we going to do? And then, of course, Wayne was leaving as well. And I thought, well, that's it. So long, folks. It's over. These two major people are leaving us. I was crazy about Wayne, still am. I love him dearly. And I thought, this is it. And in walks Harry Morgan, who was a blessing, a gift, a joy. I mean, and his commander. See, to the producer's credit, nobody ever replaced anybody on the show. You couldn't, and they knew that. Nobody on the planet could be McLean Stevenson, who would literally come in here and do 20 minutes that would have you rolling on the floor, crying, without a rehearsal or preparation. Everything. The world was his prop, and he was just a genius in that way. Harry, in his own way, does the same thing, but Sherman Potter's way. And he was a gift. And Mike as well. Mike Farrell came in. In fact, Mike told me later, he said, somebody said, it's going to be tough with Loretta. She really loves Wayne. It's going to be tough to replace or fill that space. And of course, he's just my dearest, dearest chum in the world. I love and adore him. I've always said he's the swellest person I know, but he really is a terrific, special person. And again, we were so lucky, although I think the producers were careful and judicious. They just did us all a big favor by finding these two guys to come in. And so not only, we didn't even flounder. These two people continued to elevate the integrity of the series by bringing in their fresh take, whereas Wayne's character was such a flirt, it was so totally different from the character they wrote for Honeycutt, who was straight, square, true, talked about his family all the time, and so then when they wrote an episode where he finds himself attracted to somebody, there's a whole different look at his character. But so they were so different and both so interesting and so wonderful that it added another ingredient, two ingredients in this case, to this already wonderfully bubbling stew. And you have to credit the producers for doing that to us, giving us those people, and then to bring in somebody like David Ogden Stiers. It was just so wonderful for the existing cast to have this new flavor, this new aura. He was just so different and such an actor. A lot of people don't realize that David doesn't talk with a Boston accent, but more importantly, he's one of America's leading Shakespearean actors. He would leave MASH and do King Lear on hiatus. I mean, he's also a great conductor. He's a musical person. But there we have this other gift coming in, and you have a new tune sort of in your medley of songs, and it's great. And the combinations of characters then become affected by this new ingredient. What would happen if these two came together and you had this wonderful stuff?
Let me just take you back to one thing, the killing off of McLean's character.
Oh, yeah.
How did the public react to that, and how were you informed?
Gene told us that they received phone calls and letters, and it gave them a great opportunity to say, you're not mad at us, you're mad at the war. The war killed that character that you loved. Do something about that. That's what we're trying to say in the series. We're saying war is hell. And you're right to be angry. You should be outraged. And he said that's what they did. They turned it around to demonstrate that this was an opportunity for the audience to feel the impact. Michael O'Hurley said something very interesting to me once. He was born in Europe, and he said, this was in the 1970s, he said, to most Americans, war is only a telegram. And by that he meant you haven't been in Europe standing on bread lines or waiting for food coupons. You haven't been in the middle of a blitz and it's funny how it no longer applies. I was in New York on September 11th, 2003. So, God, it's amazing to realize that. But when he said that, it was true. And it was true during this episode when McLean Stevenson, who was clearly their favorite, they loved this character and they loved McLean. And when he died, they were angry with us. They were angry, and they wrote the producers and phoned the producers, and they wanted, an explanation of this. And Jean said it's interesting to note that until McLean wanted to leave, they would never have thought to do that. But since he was leaving, this gave them kind of that opportunity. I don't know that they wrote it with that in mind, but when the reaction happened, I think they put that forward as, here's something for you to chew on. This is what you should be thinking. We're fiction. The war, however, is real. See what you can do to fix that, to end that. And that shouldn't happen. You're right. It's terrible. So it was very interesting in that respect, that he said the reaction was absolutely overwhelming. You can't imagine.
I'd like to ask you about the filming of the last episode, not the finale, but the last one that you actually filmed. And how did you feel doing that last scene?
Oh, golly. It was called Time Capsule. We had, Stage 9 was filled with press. We had a little section where we were shooting roped off, and there was this sea, literally a sea of people holding cameras over their heads, and it just, oh golly, I can't. Well, so everybody else was back here working, and we were roped off trying to do this final thing, and it was Alan and I had the final scene. It wasn't the final scene of the episode, but we were talking it. I don't know whether he didn't like what his reading or whether he kept going up on the line, but we did it again and again and again. And finally, when it was a print, Bert Metcalf yelled, "That's a print. That's cut. That's a print. That's a wrap." And the champagne bottles were there getting popped, and this fountain of champagne was kind of springing over all of us, and everybody was grabbing everybody and hugging and kissing, and in a funny way, it seemed too short, too fast. It was, that part of it was over very quickly, and then we were led out through a back exit, put onto a bus, and driven to the commissary, which was set up with a dais and filled with chairs for the press, and we were up there with microphones to talk about our sort of reactions to the moment.
So immediately you were...
Almost immediately, yes. I had, streaks of tears. And
did it take you a day or so to finally realize the impact?
Longer than that, I think, because of the nature of the beast. We were on hiatus once a year, and it at first appeared to be a hiatus until you started working on other things, and you didn't go back to base anymore. It turned out to, I think the feeling we had was, it was our base. The 407 7th was our base, and we went back to that base after the hiatus. And then this time around, we just kind of kept going. And I think it took a while longer. We stayed very quiet and very close the last few weeks. We stayed in our little green room. You have no idea what a euphemism that is for a green room. Alan and Mike had this theory that rats came in and peed on the chessboard every night. But we did. We purposely kind of stayed contained and quiet and close.
Now I'd like to ask you about the filming of the movie, the finale,
Mm-hmm.
Goodbye, Farewell,
Mm-hmm.
Amen.
Mm-hmm.
How different was that than doing an actual series episode? Did it have a different feeling about it?
Moments. David Ogden Stiers had done this perfectly lovely thing during the filming, and so those moments, and my last words to Harry in the script, there were certain moments. Other than that, you're shooting every day. But the overlying difference would be, it was about the end of the war. It was about peace. It was about going home. So that was the big difference in shooting. But again, it was not in sequence, or worse than that. Not only was it non-sequential within the film, we were shooting another 2 episodes, I think, at the same time. There was a big fire at the ranch, and so many things were going on. I don't think it gave you, at least for myself, I don't think it gave me a sense of shooting this 2.5-hour movie. But David, and this is so charming and such a lovely story. I want to talk about David Ogden Stiers for a second. I teased him always. He's very much his own person who doesn't socialize all that much, and he's very into his music and Shakespeare and so forth. And nobody even had his phone number. We didn't really have an address. We got him through his agent, and we were all so chummy. And I mean, it wasn't that he was unfriendly. He was wonderfully friendly. He had his own nickname for me, and we loved working together. I know we did. He called me Letitia for whatever his crazy reasons. Anyway, so I would tease him about it. I said, I don't know how to get you. If I need to call you and invite you to my house to a party, or I don't know how. And I would tease him about this all the time. And in the episode, in the movie, she's very angry with Winchester because he's so petty about her having to return a book. And he doesn't feel it's petty. He thinks, things should be borrowed perhaps, but then returned to the rightful owner. And, he was doing his Winchester and I was doing Margaret. And in the finale, he wants Margaret to have the book as a memento, and he's about to give it to her. And the Winchester inscribes it probably to Margaret. And David handed me the book when it was my close-up. And I opened it, and it was to me, and it had his phone number. And I looked up at him. I mean, if you when you rewatch the movie, you will see that was my reaction was based on what David, the actor, did to Loretta, But we were able to do things like that. And for Harry, who's still, the love of my life, they wrote for Margaret, who had a very special relationship with Sherman Potter. He was kind of, in a way, the father she never had, or the fatherly warmth that she never had from her general father. And he was her commanding officer. He was her friend. He was her teacher in a way. He was so many things. And in real life, her colleague as well. And when we read it in rehearsal, I thought to myself, is that enough? Does that encompass what I really think as Margaret? And then I thought, no, that's it. Nobody could write it better than that or say it better than that. And it was so simple. It held all my feelings about him. And it was, you dear sweet man, I'll never forget you. That was it. The world was in there. We had to shoot it a few times. Harry and I could not stop crying. And Bert came over. He said, "People, please. It's going to be 2.5 hours of people crying. I can't have that." You know. I have, in fact, this lovely photograph of Harry and me shooting that scene, and we must have been waiting because our heads are touching together, and we look like we're trying to pull it together, and it's one of my favorite photographs I have framed in my house. And I have one with me and Jamie in kind of the same pose, but we're kidding. You know, I'm like kind of giving him one of my clinger, "Don't you even think about doing that." And he's giving me one of his, you know, I'm a Section 8. But it was so kind of funny that the nose-to-nose shots, you know, that I had with the two characters. So that I think it was more those moments than I'm shooting a movie about saying goodbye, etc.
Did you continue to have a relationship with Harry Morgan after the series?
Oh, yes, of course. The people will say, do you people keep in touch with them? They're my best friends. Of course we keep in touch. Do you keep in touch with your best friends? You know, but people don't know that. And it doesn't always happen. It's true. So, oh, yes, absolutely. I talked to Harry yesterday, as a matter of fact. He is very, very much in my life, as they all are.
What do you think is the legacy of MASH?
Oh, what I would hope for it to be, or what it appears to be, since it's still in syndicated reruns globally. I think a lot of what we were trying to say would be the legacy, and that was that war is horrible. We shouldn't have it. It's not healthy for living things. That we should honor and respect those people who go out there and do an impossible job in an impossible situation and do it anyway, do it with courage and with, you know, with craziness and humor so that they can survive it. I think the legacy of extraordinary writing, this special kind of touch that Altman put on the movie, and then our writers, I think the movie gave us his ideas, his form, and so forth, and then kind of the genius of Gelbart took over that, and then the stable of writers that we had that stuck to this form. I think it was breakthrough realism, honest and true to the fact. Nurses did not wear jewelry. They wore, well, no makeup there, but given that it's a television show, as little as possible. We did wear fatigues. We did wear the socks and the boots. I mean, they didn't cut corners. They really tried to keep us in the real thing as much as possible. And the stories, they never stopped researching the true stories that came out of the real experience. I think, or I would hope, the legacy is major. It's a study in what could be done in the medium. Keep it enlightening as well as entertaining. Keep it real and still be funny, still be true and honest without turning it into a caricature or, And that's massive. If we did that, that's quite a legacy. I know that certainly would be what their hope would have been.
Okay, we're at the end of our tape.